After a few hours in the water, both Kevin and Teresa were tired. They had lunch, and once again Garrett told his diving stories. This time for Kevin's benefit. Kevin asked what seemed like 100 wide-eyed questions. Garrett answered each one patiently, and Teresa was relieved at how well they seemed to get along. After stopping at the motel to pick up the book and the lesson for the following day, Garrett brought them both to his house. Though Kevin had planned on starting the next few chapters right away. The fact that Garrett lived on the beach changed everything, standing in the living room and looking towards the ocean. He asked, "Can I go down to the water, Mom?" "I don't think so," she said gently. "We have just spent all day in the pool." "Mom, please, you don't have to go with me. You can watch me from the deck." She hesitated, and Kevin knew he had her. "Please," he said again, giving her his most earnest smile. "All right, you can go, but don't go out too deep, okay?" "I won't, I promise," he said excitedly. After seizing the towel Garrett handed him, he ran down to the water. Garrett and Teresa sat on the deck and watched him as he began to splash around. "He's quite a young man," Garrett said quietly. "Yes, he is," she said, "and I think he likes you. At lunch, when you went to the bathroom, he said you were cool." Garrett smiled. "I'm glad I like him too. He is one of the better students I have had." "You are just saying that to please me." "No, I'm not. He really is. I meet a lot of young kids in my classes, and he is very mature and well-spoken for his age, and he is nice too. Too many kids are spoiled these days, but I don't get that sense about him." "Thank you. I mean it, Teresa. After hearing about your worries, I wasn't sure what to expect." "But he's really a great kid. You have done a good job raising him." She reached for his hand and kissed it gently. She spoke quietly. "It means a lot to me to hear you say that. I haven't met many men who want to talk about him, let alone spend time with him." "Then it's their loss." She smiled. "How come you always know exactly what to say to make me feel good?" "Maybe it's because you bring out the best in me." "Maybe I do." That evening, Garrett took Kevin to the video store to pick up a couple of movies he wanted to watch and ordered pizza for the three of them. They watched the first movie together, eating in the living room. After dinner, Kevin slowly began to fade. By 9 o'clock, he'd fallen asleep in front of the TV. Teresa nudged him gently, telling him it was the time to leave. "Can't we just sleep here tonight?" he mumbled, only half conscious. "I think we should go," she said quietly. "If you want, you two can sleep in my bed," Garrett offered. "I will stay out here and sleep on the couch." Let's do that, Mom. I am really tired. Are you sure? She asked, but by then Kevin had already begun to stagger in the direction of the bedroom. They heard the springs squeak as Kevin plopped down on Garrett's bed. Following him, they peeked in the door. In a moment, he was sleeping again. I don't think he is giving you much choice, Garrett whispered. I'm still not sure it's a good idea. I'll be a perfect gentleman, I promise. I'm not worried about you. I just don't want to give Kevin the wrong impression. You mean you don't want him to know we care about each other? I think he already knows that. You know what I mean. Yeah, I know, he shrugged. Look, if you want me to help you get him out of the track, I'd be glad to do it. She stared at Kevin for a moment, listening to his deep, even breath. He looked dead to the world. Well, maybe one night wouldn't hurt. She relented, and Garrett winked. I was hoping you said that. No, don't forget your promise to be a perfect gentleman. I won't. You sound so sure about it. Hey, a promise is a promise. She gently closed the door and put her arms around Garrett's neck. She kissed him, biting him teasingly on the lip. That's good, because if it was just up to me, I don't think I could control myself. He winced. You really know how to make it tough on a guy, don't you? Does that mean you think I'm a tease? No, he said quietly. It means I think you are perfect. Instead of watching the second movie, Garrett and Teresa sat on the couch, sipping wine and talking. Teresa checked on Kevin a couple of times, making sure he was still asleep. He looked as if he hadn't moved at all. By midnight, Teresa was yawning steadily, and Garrett suggested that she get some sleep. But I came down here to see you, she protested drowsily. But if you don't get your sleep, I'll look blurry. I'm fine, really, she said before yawning again, and Garrett rose and went to the closet. He pulled out a sheet, blanket, and pillow and brought them to the couch. I insist, try to get some sleep. We have the next few days to see each other. Are you sure? Positive. She helped Garrett get to the couch ready and went to the bedroom. If you don't want to sleep in your clothes, there are some sweets in the second drawer, he said. She kissed him again. I had a wonderful day today, she said. So did I. I'm sorry for being so tired. You have done a lot today. It's completely understandable. With their arms entwined, she whispered in his ear, Are you always this easy to get along with? I try. Well, you are doing a heck of a job. A few hours later, Garrett woke to the sensation of someone nodding him in the ribs. Opening his eyes, he saw Teresa sitting next to him. She was wearing the sweets he'd mentioned earlier. Are you okay? He asked, sitting up. I'm fine, she whispered, stroking his arm. What time is it? A little after 3. Is Kevin still sleeping? Like a rock. Can I ask why you got out of the bed? I had a dream and I couldn't fall back to sleep. He rubbed his eyes. What was the dream about? You, she said in a hushed tone. Was it a good dream? He asked. Yes, she trailed off. She leaned over to kiss his chest, and Garrett pulled her closer. He glanced towards the bedroom door. She had closed it behind her. Aren't you worried about Kevin? He asked. A little, but I'm going to trust you to be as quiet as possible. She reached under the blanket and ran her finger across his belly. Her touch was electric. Are you sure about this? Yes, she said. They made love tenderly, quietly, and afterwards they lay beside each other for a long time. Neither of them spoke. When the faintest hint of light began to approach the horizon, they kissed a good night and she returned to the bedroom. Within a few minutes she was sleeping soundly and Garrett watched her from the doorway. For some reason, he found it impossible to fall asleep again. The following morning, Teresa and Kevin did the workbook together while Garrett ran off to pick up some fresh bagels for breakfast. Again, they headed off to the pool, and this time the lessons were a little more advanced. Covering a number different of skills, Teresa and Kevin practiced body breathing in the event that either one of them ran out of air when underwater and had to share one tank, and Garrett warned one of the danger of panicking while diving and rushing to the surface too quickly. If you do that, you'll get what's called the bends. It's not only a painful, it can be life-threatening. They also spent time in the deep end of the pool, swimming underwater for extended periods, getting used to the equipment and practicing how to clear their ears. Towards the end of their lesson, Garrett showed them how to jump off the side of the pool without having their masks come off. Predictably, both of them were tired after a few hours and ready to call it a day. Will we go into the ocean tomorrow? Kevin asked. They were walking back to the truck. If you like to, I think you are ready. But if you rather spend another day in a pool, we could do that instead. No, I'm ready. Are you sure? I don't want to rush you. I'm sure, he said quickly. How about you, Teresa? Are you ready for the ocean? If Kevin is ready, then I'm ready. Am I still going to get certified by Tuesday? Kevin asked. If the ocean dives go well, you both will. Awesome. What's up for the rest of the day? Teresa asked. Garrett started loading the tanks in the back of the truck. I thought we'd go sailing. It looks like it's going to be a great weather. Can I learn how to do that too? Kevin asked eagerly. Sure, I'll make you my first mate. Do I need to be certified for that too? No, that's up to the captain, and since I'm the captain, I can do it right now. Just like that. Just like that. Kevin looked at the trestle with wide eyes, and she could almost read his thoughts. First, I learn how to dive, then I become a first mate. Wait until I tell my friends. Garrett was accurate in predicting ideal weather, and the three of them had a wonderful time on the water. Garrett taught Kevin the basics of sailing, from how and when to tack off, anticipating the direction of the wind based on the clouds. As on their first day together, they had sandwiches and salads, but this time they were treated to a family of porpoises that frolicked around the boat as they are. It was late by the time they made it back to the docks, and after Garrett showed Kevin how to close up the boat to protect it from unexpected storm, Garrett brought them back to their motel. Since all three of them were exhausted, Theresa and Garrett said goodbye quickly, and both Theresa and Kevin were in bed by the time Garrett arrived back at his house. The following day, Garrett took them out of their first ocean dive. After the initial nervousness wore off, they began to enjoy themselves and ended up going through 2 tanks each over the course of the afternoon. Thanks to the calm and coastal weather, the water was clear with excellent visibility. Garrett took a few photos of them as they explored one of the shallow water wrecks of the North Carolina's coast. He promised to have them developed that week and to send them up as soon as he could. They spent the evening at Garrett's house again, and after Kevin fell asleep, Garrett and Theresa sat close to each other on the deck, courtesied by the warm and humid air. After talking about their earlier dive, Theresa was quiet for a little while. I can't believe we'll be leaving tomorrow night, she said finally. A trace of sadness in her voice. These last couple of days has flown by. That's because we have been so busy. She smiled. No, you have a sense of what my life is like in Boston. Always racing around. She nodded. Exactly. Kevin is the best thing that ever happened to me, but he sometimes wears me out. He always has to be doing something. You wouldn't change it though, would you? I mean, you don't want to raise a TV junkie or a kid who sits in his room listening to music all day, do you? Then count your blessing. He is a great kid. I have really enjoyed spending time with him. I'm so glad. I know he feels the same way. She paused. You know, even though we haven't spent much time alone on this trip, it seems like I know you a lot better now than when I first came down here by myself. What do you mean? I'm still the same guy I was before. She smiled. You are and you are not. The last time I was here, you had me all to yourself. And we both know it's easier to get involved with someone when you can spend a lot of exclusive time together. This time you saw what it would really be like with Kevin around, and yet you handled the whole thing better than I could have imagined. Well, thanks, but it wasn't that hard. As long as you are around, it doesn't matter what we do. I just like spending time with you. He puts his arm around her, pulling her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. In silence, they listened as the waves rolled up along a beach. Are you going to stay over again tonight? He asked. I was giving it some serious consideration. Would you want me to be a perfect gentleman again? Maybe, maybe not. He raised his eyebrow. Are you flirting with me? I'm trying, she confessed. And he laughed. You know, Garrett, I really feel comfortable around you. Comfortable? You make it sound like I'm a coach. I don't mean it like that. I mean, I just feel good about myself when we are together. You should. I feel pretty good about you. Pretty good, that's it. He shook his head. No, that's not all. He looked almost bashful for a second. After you left the last time, my dad came in and lectured me. What did he say? He said that if you made me happy, that I shouldn't let you go. And how do you intend to do that? I guess I'll have to bowl you over with my charisma. You have already done that. He glanced at her, then looked out over the water, and after a moment he spoke quietly. Then I guess I'll have to tell you that I love you. Overhead the stars were out in full twinkling in the darkened sky. Distant clouds rose to the horizon, reflecting the lights of a crescent moon. Teresa listened as the words rolled through her head again. No violence this time, no doubt about what he'd said. Do you really? She whispered finally. Yes, he said, turning to face her. I do. When he answered, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Garrett, she began uncertainly, before Garrett interrupted her with a shake of his head. Teresa, I don't expect you to feel the same way. I just wanted you to know how I feel. He thought for a moment and found himself remembering the dream he'd had. Over the last 2 weeks, a lot of things have happened. He paused. She started to say something, but Garrett shook his head. It took a moment for him to continue. And I'm not sure I understand everything, but I do know how I feel about you. His finger gently moved across her cheek and lips. I love you, Teresa. I love you too, she said softly, trying out the words and hoping they were true. They held each other for a long time afterwards, then went inside and made love, whispering to each other until the early morning hours. But this time, after Teresa went to the bedroom, Garrett slept soundly while Teresa stayed awake, thinking about the miracle that had brought them together. The next day passed wonderfully. Whenever they had a chance, Garrett and Teresa held hands, stealing a few furtive kisses when Kevin wasn't looking. They spent their day practicing as they had before, and once they had finished their final diving lesson, Garrett gave them their temporary certificates right on above. You can dive whenever and wherever you want now, he said to Kevin, who handled the certificate almost as if it were gold. Just send this form in and you'll leave your PADI certificate in a couple of weeks. But remember, it's never safe to dive alone. Always go with someone else. Since it was their last day in Wilmington, Teresa checked them out of the motel, and the three of them went to Garrett's house. Kevin wanted to spend their last few hours on the beach, and Teresa and Garrett sat with him near the water's edge. For a while, Garrett and Kevin played frisbee, and realizing it was getting late in the afternoon, Teresa went inside and found something to eat. They had a quick dinner on the back deck, hot dogs on the grill, and before Garrett drew them to the airport and after Teresa and Kevin had safely boarded, Garrett stayed a few minutes watching until the plane finally began to back out of the gate. When it drove out of sight, he walked back to the truck and returned home. Already watching the clock to see how long it would be until he could call her that evening. In their eyes, Teresa and Kevin thumbed through magazines. Halfway through the first leg of their trip home, Kevin suddenly turned to her and asked, "Mom, do you like Garrett?" "Yes, I do, but more important, do you like him?" "I think he's cool for a grown-up, I mean." Teresa smiled. "You two seem to have hit it off. Are you glad we came?" He nodded. "Yeah, I'm glad." He paused, fidgeting with the magazine. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you gonna marry Garrett?" "I don't know why." "Do you want to?" It took her a few moments to answer. "I'm not sure. I don't know that I don't want to marry him right now. We are still getting to know each other." "But you might want to marry him in the future." "Maybe." Kevin looked relieved. "I'm glad. You seemed like you were really happy when you were with him." "Could you tell? Mom, I'm 12. I know more than you think." She reached over and touched his hand. "Well, what would you have said if I told you I did want to marry him now?" He was quiet for a moment. "I guess I wonder where we were gonna live." For the life of her, Teresa couldn't think of a good response. Where indeed? 4 days after Teresa left Wilmington, Garrett had another dream. Only this time it was about Catherine. In the dream they were in a grassy field bordered by a cliff overlooking the ocean. They were walking together, holding hands and talking, when Garrett said something that made her laugh. All at once she broke away from him, looking over her shoulder and laughing. She called for Garrett to chase her. He did, laughing as well. feeling much as he had the day they were married. Watching her run, he couldn't help but notice how beautiful she was. Her flowing hair reflected the light of the high yellow sun, and her legs were lean and moving rhythmically. Effortlessly, her smile, despite the fact she was running, looked easy and relaxed, as if she were standing still. "Chase me, Garrett, can you catch me?" she called. The sounds of laughter after she said it floated in the air around him. Sounding musical, he was slowly gaining on her when he noticed that she was heading towards the cliff. In her excitement and joy, she didn't seem to realize where she was going. "What's that ridiculous?" he thought. "She has to know." Garrett called for her to stop, but instead she began to run faster. She was approaching the edge of the cliff. With a feeling of certain dread, he saw that he was still too far behind her to catch her. He ran as fast as he could, screaming for her to turn around. She didn't appear to hear him. He felt the adrenaline rush through his body, fed by a paralyzing fear. "Stop, Catherine," he shouted, his lungs exhausted. "The cliff, you are not watching where you are going." The more he shouted, the softer his voice became, until it turned into a whisper. Catherine kept on running, unaware the cliff was only a few feet away. He was closing ground, but he was still too far behind. "Stop!" he screamed again, though this time he knew she couldn't hear it. His voice had diminished to nothing, and the panic he felt then was greater than anything he'd ever known. With everything he had, he willed his legs to move faster, but they began to tire, turning heavier with every step he took. "I'm not going to make it," he thought, panicking. Then, just as suddenly as she had broken away, she stopped, turning to face him. She seemed oblivious of any danger. She stood only inches from the edge. "Don't move," he shouted. But again it came out in a whisper. He stopped a few feet from her and held out his hand, breathing heavily. "Come toward me," he pleaded. "You are right on the edge." She smiled and glanced behind her. Noticing how close she was to falling, she turned towards him. "Did you think you were going to lose me?" "Yes," he said quietly. "And I promise not to ever let it happen again." Garrett woke and sat up in bed, staying awake for several hours afterwards. When he finally fell back to sleep, it was fitful at best, and it was almost 10 o'clock the next morning before he was able to get up. Still exhausted and feeling depressed, he found it impossible to think about anything but the dream. Not knowing what to do, he called his father, who met him for breakfast in their usual place. "I don't know why I feel this way," he told his father after a few minutes of small talk. "I just don't understand it." His father didn't answer. Instead, he watched his son over his coffee cup, remaining silent as his son went on. It's not like she did anything to upset me, she continued. We just spent a long weekend together and I really care for her. I met her son too and he's great. It's just that I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep this up. Garrett paused. The only sounds came from the tables around them. Keep what up? Jeb Blake finally asked. Garrett stirred his coffee absently. I don't know whether I can see her again. His father cocked an eyebrow but didn't reply. Garrett went on. Maybe it's just not meant to be. I mean, she doesn't even live here. She's 1,000 miles away. She got her own life, she got her own interests, and here I am, living down here and leading an entirely separate life. Maybe she'd do better with someone else, someone she could see on a regular basis. He thought about what he'd said, knowing that he didn't quite believe himself. Still, he didn't want to tell his father about the dream. I mean, how can we build a relationship if we don't see each other very often? Again, his father said nothing. Garrett carried on as if talking to himself. If she lived here and I could see her every day, I think I'd feel differently. But with her being gone, he trailed off trying to make sense of his thoughts, and after a while he spoke again. I just don't see how we can make it work. I have thought about it a lot and I don't see how it could be possible. I don't want to move to Boston and I'm sure she doesn't want to move here, so where would that leave us? Garrett stopped and waited for his father to say something, anything in response to what he'd said up to that point. But for a while he didn't make a sound. Finally he sighed and looked away. It sounds to me like you are making excuses, Jeb said quietly. You are trying to convince yourself, and you are using me to listen to your self-talk. No, Dad, I'm not. I'm just trying to figure out this whole thing. Who do you think you are talking to, Garrett? Jeb Blake shook his head. Sometimes I swear you think I just fell off the turnip truck and mumbled through life without learning anything along the way. But I know exactly what you are going through. You have gotten so caught up in being alone that you are afraid of what might happen if you actually find someone else that can take you away from it. I'm not afraid, Garrett protested. His father cut him off sharply. You can't even admit it to yourself, can you? The disappointment in his tone was unmistakable. You know, Garrett, when your mom died, I made excuses too. Over the years, I told myself all sort of the things, and you wanna know where it got me? He stared at his son. I'm old and tired, and most of all, I'm alone. If I could go back in time, I'd change a lot about myself, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let you do the same thing I did. Jeb paused before going on, and his tone softening. I was wrong, Garrett. I was wrong not to try to find someone else. I was wrong to feel guilty about your mom. I was wrong to keep living my life the way I did, always suffering inside and wondering what she would have thought, because you know what? I think your mom would have wanted me to find someone else. Your mom would have wanted me to be happy. And you know why?